Hello, Manchester City fans. It's a new face today. I am Sam Hutchison. I'm hosting today's Talking City podcast, hopefully making a super sub appearance with our ever-present, it's just like Rodri in Man City's midfield, Simon Bajkowski. How are you, Simon?
Yeah, very well, very well. The long wait for club football to return. It feels like we've done a podcast every day, but we keep going.
Apart from the international break, there was a couple of sporting events over the weekend in Manchester. The boxing, I'm not sure you watched it, but it was a very non-event, really. How much would it take for you to get in a boxing ring? That's my question for you.
I mean, it would depend who was in the ring with me. Some people I wouldn't need any money to go in. But
I was going to ask you a question. Which of your colleagues would you most like to fight in a boxing ring? But I won't ask that because I don't want to get you in any trouble.
Yeah.
But for Manchester City, you wrote a piece this morning on the ever-present that is Rodri. So, do you want to expand on that a little bit?
Well, it was kind of to do with Rodri and Erling Haaland, who faced each other kind of last night on international duty. And yeah, Rodri obviously been the talk of City for the last few weeks, having missed 3 games and sort of 2 very, very costly defeats while he's been out for a sort of stupid red card against Nottingham Forest. But, Guardiola sort of often doesn't take these red cards well, but there was no kind of like punishment of Rodri as such, and he got a couple of days off in Madrid before he went to international duty, and then he's gone and played for Spain and looked, like the player that he's been for City for the last year or two. So Haaland and Norway kind of needed Rodri to put in a pretty poor performance if they were to have any chance of beating Spain and keeping their hopes of qualifying for Euro 2024 alive. But he played really well, and Spain beat Norway, and it looks like Haaland's going to miss out on another major tournament. He was... I think there's a slim chance Norway can still qualify through the Nations League, but it looks like it's going to be another 2 years before they can go for one.
And obviously, Rodri has played a lot of minutes at centre-half for Spain. His old centre-half partnership, Aymeric Laporte, was starting again for Spain since his move to Saudi Arabia in the summer, and we'll come on to that later on in this podcast, the departures from the summer and how they're sort of getting on. Do we think Man City miss any of those? But how quiet are these international breaks covering City? Because it has been really peaceful, I'd imagine.
Yeah. This one in particular seems very quiet. I don't think I've taken any time off during it, which might be a part of it. But usually it's just kind of, if you kind of think about how busy City's schedule is when it's not international breaks, they're kind of playing every 2 days, every 3 days, like 2 games a week. So that is the players and the staff, but it's also kind of a lot of employees at the club. Yeah. And so when they get a chance, when like the players and staff aren't in for 10 days a week, they kind of use that time to
rest and recuperate
and take a few days and maybe a few days back when they've worked over that time. And then also, players are away and on international duty, and they don't kind of want to be bothered with club stuff while they're with the countries. So yeah, there's kind of, everyone sort of goes to ground a bit and then starts to kind of re-emerge maybe Tuesday, Wednesday before the football starts again.
And like you just said, Norway have missed out on automatic qualification. There is a possibility they still qualify for the Euros. You'd expect most of City's European squad members to be at the Euros pretty much every time. Yeah. Is there a silver lining there if some of City's stars do miss out? Obviously we want to see Haaland on the biggest stage, scoring all the goals for his country as well as Man City, but is there a silver lining for City fans? He's not going to be away, getting injured. He'll come back completely fresh. He'll have had a nice long summer holiday, probably in Ibiza, like he usually is.
Yeah, I mean, potentially, but I think we saw with the World Cup, Haaland and Mahrez were the only 2 City players who didn't go away. And when Haaland came back, he wasn't kind of as sharp as he could have been. And I think, having not had matches for 6 to 8 weeks, and he kind of wasn't able to maybe keep in the best fitness, and certainly wasn't as fit as some of the players who've been, training in Qatar and playing in Qatar. So, it's a real tough one for Haaland because, he has like the hopes of his nation on him he desperately wants to qualify for a major tournament and to kind of like get his team over the line. And when everyone looks at Norway not qualifying, it's kind of like, oh, Haaland didn't perform then. Whereas I think he's got like a goal a game for Norway in the
he's been really
qualifying.
Good. He's got something like 27 goals in 28 games for Norway.
Yeah. So he can only do so much, but he really, in the same way that he wants to, win the Champions League and tick off X, Y, and Z in his career, one of them is, getting Norway back to where he thinks they want to be, because I think they've qualified for like 3 World Cups and 1 Euros, but not since 2000. But that, of course, was like just around the time when he was being born.
So not in my lifetime.
But he's like, his dad knows about it, so it's something he really wants to do, and he will be really hurting that he's not there.
And obviously he's not the only Norwegian international in the City squad. Oscar Bob also started last night against Spain. What do we sort of think of him? Are we expecting to see a lot more of him going forward this season, maybe even into next season? Yeah,
I think we will see a lot of him this season. I think he's sort of really been helped by the fact that Cole Palmer and James McAtee have moved on, McAtee on loan. And, when City have had a few injuries this season, like the bench has been really thin, and like sometimes their only attacking option has been Bob on the bench. So I think he's in a really good position where he, can pick up all those minutes when, City are winning games 3-0 with 20 minutes to go. But it's kind of, I don't know, he's not the youngest. Like Rico Lewis is 18. I think Bob's got a few years on him, but he's kind of been protected at City and not sort of thrust into it. But then to be able to make your national team debut within like a few months of making your senior team debut is clearly like staying with the City squad this season and breaking into the City team has clearly been very beneficial for him at a national team level as well. And you would think he will go from strength to strength for each.
Yeah. There was rumours in the summer, people were interested in taking him off City's hands.
Yeah.
And City kept him, basically, which means at least somebody at the club is thinking he's got a part to play this season.
Yeah. Because he's been one of, if not the best player at kind of under 23, under 21 level for the past 2 years. And, even before last season had finished, I was hearing that, they were going to move him up and keep him in the squad this season. But then with the way the summer transfer window has panned out, he's got even more opportunity than even I think he thought he would have. Yeah. So it looks very, very promising for him if he can take his opportunities.
Yeah, I mean, I really like Oscar Bob because he's one of those traditional wingers, gets you off your seat, and because he's got a brilliant name.
He does,
Is there anyone else that we're really excited to see going into the rest of the season from City? Is there anybody coming through the youth ranks that you think maybe we could see a lot more of? Could you like to say City squad is looking relatively thin this season? Yeah,
it is thin, and it is also thin at academy level. There's a real kind of, they made a lot of money from the academy in summer by selling off all of their best assets, really. So when Guardiola first talks about the Newcastle game in the Carabao Cup, he sort of said, we're going to have to use the kids. And then he later sort of had a few conversations and was like, actually, I don't think we've got any kids to use as such because none of them are quite ready. There's a few youngsters who've been training with the first team sort of a fair bit, Max Elaine at the back and Tom Galvez and players like that. But I think Micah Hamilton was on the bench at Newcastle, so he could come in. But I think for now, Pep will go back to kind of the players that he has been using. But it will be interesting to see, how much Rico Lewis plays, because obviously him starting at Arsenal was huge, and he's probably not going to get into the team ahead of Rodri, but the fact that he was preferred to both Phillips and Nunes says that, you know, he could be a real option to get a lot of minutes this season.
Yeah, and I mean, Rico Lewis is one of those fantastically versatile, sort of half a fullback, half a defensive midfielder sort of players. I think that there's going to be a lot of minutes on offer at a lot of roles for a player like Rico Lewis, who clearly is top quality and clearly is in Pep's thinking for starting. Yeah.
And, you know, one of the factors from the first few months of the season is Kyle Walker has played a hell of a lot. And he's been great, but he probably can't keep it up for the whole season. And when he can't, you know, John Stones has got to come back into the team at some point. But you would expect that when Walker is rested or, you know, isn't picked for certain matches, then Lewis, as kind of the only other right back in the squad, will have a real chance of getting those minutes as well as any others he picks up in midfield.
Yeah, and because of the injuries to John Stones, he's not been available at right back.
And we talk about John Stones coming back, but like he has been injured all season, and I think it's been 2 different injuries. So we can't talk about John Stones coming back as if like, oh, he'll come straight back into the team and play every game. Especially
with the form that's been on show from like Lewis. And
Absolutely, yeah.
I think he's really got a big future in the game. The England squad, he's not made it to the senior team yet.
Yeah.
England squad, did you catch the England versus Australia game?
Yeah, unfortunately, yeah.
I'm not sure it was a box office.
No, you would like to think that there's a big improvement in for the next game against Italy. But yeah, I mean, Rico Lewis again, like if he does in the same way that like Oscar Bob has broken in at Norway and sort of they've noticed that at his national team and picked up, you do wonder whether Southgate is kind of like fiercely loyal to his players, but at some point you wonder whether you would like to think that by next May, both kind of Jordan Henderson's place in the squad and maybe Calvin Phillips' place in the squad, if Rico Lewis is regularly
starting over Calvin Phillips at City, why would he not for England?
Yeah, like, you know, Southgate has obviously got a lot of trust in these players and they've got a lot of credit in the bank for their performances under him. But especially if Southgate's if he's making this his last tournament, does he not want to kind of give himself his best chance of winning the tournament with the best players for that tournament, as well as the fact that, you know, Lewis is surely going to play a big part in England's future going forward. So, yeah, I mean, it might not come to anything, but I wouldn't be surprised if Lewis kind of makes a squad before the end of the season and gives Southgate something to think about. Certainly with, I mean, the reaction to Henderson and things like that, you think, is that a sustainable situation? I suppose we've seen a few boos for Harry Maguire, and then he's kind of continued and looks like he may well continue. But again, if he's said, hasn't he, if he's not playing at United, then he won't get picked. So it's, again, a big opportunity for Lewis, I think.
And that brings part 1 to an end. After the break, we will discuss some of the summer signings, how City are getting on following those additions in the summer. So, welcome back to part 2, Manchester City fans. In this part, we're going to review a couple of summer signings and how the team has evolved from last season. Now that we're in this international break, we've had a little bit of the season 2 review. Are City a better side than last season? That's my starting question
That's
for you.
Starting question. No is the very simple answer. It's kind of felt like, one thing and another. So the first sort of 6 games, when they won 6 games, you kind of thought they've not really played well enough to win 6 games, but they've won 6 games. And now they've lost 2 league games in a row. And it's kind of like, oh, are City stumbling? Are they falling? And, you know, I don't really think they're any worse than they were for the first 6 games. And that their first 8 games is still enough to be 2 points off the top of the league. But you can see that they've been struggling to kind of incorporate everything. I mean, first off, they're not a better team because they've been missing Stones, De Bruyne, and a few others. And obviously they lost Gundogan, who they didn't want to lose, and they've had to replace him. Lost Mahrez, who they weren't expecting to lose. Now, Mahrez wasn't in the team towards the end of the last season, but he's still kind of a better option to have than some of the options they've had on the bench. So it's been a City team kind of searching for this new identity that they're trying to bring through and also compensate for injuries. So they've not been near the best, and they've also, we kind of expect them to be there all the time, but they, I think as you would expect of any kind of footballer and everyone else, they're probably going to be better when there's more at stake. If they lost to Arsenal in May, it would have been really bad, but losing to Arsenal in October, you're like, well, there's still 30 games to go. They can probably make up 2 points over the course of that season, which doesn't excuse them losing, but you do sort of think, they'll probably... City know it's a long season, but they also know that they will need to sort of find more fluency and improve, basically.
Yeah, and obviously they're not in full flow yet. Erling Haaland is missing more chances than he missed last season. I know on the last week's episode of this podcast, you discussed, Erling Haaland's not quite getting into full flow. He still scored so many goals and he's still a really deadly striker when the ball falls to him, but he's not quite at the same level I think he ended at last season.
Yeah. That's certainly been, a part of why City haven't looked as sort of fluid as they could be, and also with losing Gundogan and De Bruyne and people like that, they've not really been finding Haaland as much as or as well as they were able to. There are patterns emerging between Foden, Alvarez, and Haaland and others, but they're still not quite at that. Again, Haaland can't be at his peak for 12 months a year. Doesn't feel like he's at his peak now, or has been for the last month or 6 weeks. So it's kind of about how he can improve. He looks pretty sharp for Norway, scoring 2 goals. So maybe he steps it up after the international break. City will expect more from him. He will expect sort of more from himself. So it's about turning that on the pitch, basically.
And you touched on departures there, City are really missing Gundogan. They didn't want him to leave in the summer. How have the summer signings got on so far? How would you sort of rate them as a whole? Because City lost a lot of players, a lot of first-team players who played a lot of minutes last season.
Yeah.
Laporte, Mahrez, Gundogan. A couple of seasons ago, Cancelo was probably the best left-back in the world, and now he's, again, left City again for this season.
Yeah.
How have the summer signings got on to fill those sort of gaps that were left and improve in the areas that were already identified?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really interesting with bringing Kovacic and Nunez in, because that is sort of to help City move towards a slightly different style of play, sort of more kind of carrying the ball through midfield. And then you've got Doku, who is, an out-and-out winger like Leroy Sané that we've not really seen for a few years. So they do offer something different. I think probably completely understandably, they've looked better when kind of one of them or two of them have been dropped into an existing team than they have when kind of injuries or suspensions have really forced them to all play together kind of thing. Kovacic looked a lot better when he was alongside Rodri. And then when Rodri was gone, Kovacic was suddenly not wonderful. And, it felt like that Wolves game away from home was probably the worst game City have had this season. And both Kovacic and Nunez struggled in midfield to really have an influence. Doku has done very well. Kind of exceeded expectations and really kind of got City back into the game at West Ham. September, I think that was, and really drove them on. And Pep was like, I was not expecting that. he came on at Leipzig as a substitute and did very well. So he's ticking along. I think everyone's excited to see what can come from Doku with learning in this Guardiola system, because there's no doubt that he's a very exciting player. He's got huge potential, but he's also not quite taken that leap that maybe people thought he was going to take a few years ago, and he sort of there are question marks over kind of decisions in the final third, so whether he can steer clear of injuries and sharpen that up, and that will be a real asset for City to have. And then Guardiola, as the most expensive signing, has probably been the least standout. Like, he's slotted in very well. He looks very good. He's not really played as a centre-back. He spent a lot of time at left-back, which doesn't look like his best position, so it'd be interesting to see how long he stays out there for and what happens with him. But I suppose not standing out is a good thing.
Yeah, I mean, you can't. I don't think you can complain about Guardiola's impact. I think he's gone very under the radar. Because of some of the players around him, really.
Yeah, and he's played with a lot of different in a lot of different defences, because there have been a lot of injuries across the back line. He's played with kind of Grealish and Doku, who are both very different players to have in front of you. So I think he is still getting used to his teammates, basically.
And depending on what source you read, he is the most expensive defender in the world. On Euros, he's the most expensive defender in the world. On pounds, he's not quite, because of the changing exchange rates. And just behind Harry Maguire, let's hope his career doesn't have a similar trajectory to that. But have they lived up to the expectations? Would you say Guardiola, as this most expensive defender in the world, has lived up to expectations? I was looking at Nunez was 60 million euros, 65, I think, million euros. You're looking at Doku for 60 million euros, Kovacic for just less than 30. Have they lived up to the expectations of what was already there? I know it's been hard with the injuries that City have faced early in the season.
It's hard, and it's hard because certainly this summer seemed like a very inflated market. City have spent over 200 million, and it doesn't feel like, they've not blown everyone else out of the water. Chelsea have spent huge amounts, United have spent huge amounts, and both of those clubs, you would say, without really doing much, City signings have had far more of a positive impact than either, Chelsea or United, by virtue of not looking horribly out of water. I think generally it is far too early to tell, and Rodri spent a year after moving for 65 million, and everyone thought, why have they signed him? And now we all sort of say, he's probably the best number 6 in the world. So I think Kovacic and Nunez and maybe even Guardiola will take a lot of time. Doku is probably the easiest to be he'll probably be worth the money.
It's like a fish to water, isn't he?
Yeah.
A winger on the wing is...
Yeah. And he sort of doesn't... If he can win them 5 matches a season or up to 10 matches a season, then, he'll prove a real bargain.
If he can have an impact like he did against Leipzig, every time he comes off the bench, looks like it's going to be worth it.
And it's sort of, there's a big debate as to sort of who should start, and obviously kind of Doku came off the bench against Leipzig and did really well, and so you think, maybe he should be starting then, but then you think, potentially, but then also kind of, maybe he's perfect for those last 20 minutes against tired legs and minds, and maybe he becomes kind of the secret weapon off the bench to...
Yeah, a tired right back in the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So maybe that might be something new for City to use this season.
And is there anyone you think City missed out on, with the benefit of hindsight, obviously, from summer, who you think would have slotted in perfectly, apart from the obvious, your Jude Bellinghams of the world, who would have pretty much hit the ground running anywhere by the looks of things?
Yeah. Obviously, Bellingham would have been the big one. It was a really interesting window for City. Different has been a word used around City to describe it, which isn't kind of, isn't necessarily positive, and but does kind of reflect, they went for Declan Rice, didn't get him, but did they go kind of fully wholeheartedly? You look at Rice and you think, yeah, he could have been a great signing, but then you think if you've got Rodri, where does Rice play and how often does Rice play? And it's hard to think of anyone who could. It's hard to think of anyone who could improve the treble winners. There's kind of that element, but I do think that the signings that they have made kind of could. I don't think we'd have necessarily looked at, Núñez last season and thought, oh, he's definitely a City player. But you can see why they've signed every player that they have, I think, which must be a good thing for them.
Yeah, I mean, Núñez last season was pretty much Wolves' best player.
Yeah.
Outside of the ones who had already left this summer, gone to Saudi Arabia, etc.
Yeah.
Núñez was excellent, pretty much off the left wing most of the time for Wolves, which is a surprise when I was looking at it in the summer when he was linked first. He was pretty much a left winger, sort of in a 4-4-2 for Wolves a lot of the time last season, and then early this season as well. He did a very similar role, sort of cutting in off that left, which maybe Pep's got something up his sleeve. We can never predict what he's got up his sleeve, but maybe he has got something up his sleeve for a nice tactical plan to try with.
I think so, and it's just going to be interesting to see how the new signings change the team as well as how they adapt, because Núñez isn't going to be the new Gundogan or De Bruyne, so he has to sort of find his own role within the team and kind of make it his own. So how quickly the new signings can do that will probably determine how much success City have this season. And
I've got it on here. If you could have one dream signing for City, who would it be? I'm going to extend this to ever. Right now, if you think City squad right now, and people in the comments, if you're listening to this or watching this on the YouTube, let us know as well. If you could have one City player to sign for City right now, as we record this, who would that be? Drop that on you, sorry. A loaded question to drop on you.
I think from players I've watched and sort of right now, I would be really boring and say Mbappe, because I think, having seen him, he is a phenomenal player, and the sight of him in the Premier League alongside Haaland, I think would be really something to see. I think the biggest kind of over the last few years, the huge kind of sliding doors moments for City have been, when they, I wouldn't say came close, but came closer than most have to signing Messi. And then when they were in the hunt for Cristiano Ronaldo a few years ago, because it felt at the time, it was certainly kind of spun by United as a huge coup to get Ronaldo over City, and then backfired pretty spectacularly for them. But it also, City were desperate for a number 9, and Ronaldo was kind of there, and it seemed like even on the short term it would have made sense, but it didn't happen, and ultimately it looks better for City that it didn't, but it still would have been fascinating to see Ronaldo at City and all the sort of subplots that came with that.
Yeah, and just to end this part, is there anywhere City are looking? We might end up looking stupid by saying this, so I don't mind if you don't want to put a name out there or whatever. Is there anywhere City are looking weak and look like they need to strengthen in January already? Because we are preempting this quite early.
Yeah. I don't know if they just need maybe kind of another option in attack on the wing. Yeah. They brought Doku in, which is, who should be very good. They've got Grealish, who was integral to the team last season. They don't really have kind of a right winger as such. They've got Bob, who is young and inexperienced. They've got Bernardo who can play there. They've got Foden can play there. Grealish can play there a bit.
Alvarez played there a little bit for River Plate back in the day.
Alvarez has, but I've been surprised at how rarely he's played there since he's come to City. I think when he came, knowing that Haaland was the number 9, you sort of thought, well, he can play as a wide forward, fine, stick him there, and he hasn't really, which makes me think Guardiola doesn't really want him there. So it could be the case that Bernardo Silva or Phil Foden kind of makes that spot their own, or they do what they've been doing, where sort of the right player comes in and Walker just takes that side. But it does feel a bit like it is relying on a few square pegs for round holes.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'd say. Attacking depth is where City look most lacking, if you can say a treble-winning side is lacking anywhere.
Yeah, but they do look covered in defence, don't they? And they've bought these... If they shouldn't be short in midfield because they've bought midfielders, that's the thing.
Yeah, exactly. And, what happens if Haaland's had a fantastic injury record at City, but at Dortmund his injury record was a bit shaky here and there. You know, Alvarez didn't play last season as a first name on the team sheet sort of player. What happens if Haaland gets injured? Does Alvarez move up and fill that gap immediately? Yeah. Or do City need a bit more attacking depth in there as well?
Yeah, and even if Alvarez does move up, then who covers for him and who takes his place behind? You don't want to spend 100 billion on someone to play in case Haaland gets injured. But City, they found a way last year when they needed more defensive depth. They signed a Kanji who he was not on anyone else's radar essentially, and then he was a very kind of City signing for a low price and did amazingly well. If they could find someone in kind of that probably 20 to 30 million bracket in January who they could sort of help strengthen them for the second half of the season, then that might be what they're short of at the minute.
Yeah, and we've talked about incomings, all that part. Departures next. We'll see you after the break. So, City fans, welcome back. This is part 3 of the Talking City podcast. We're going to talk about every summer departure from City and how they're getting on so far this season. We're going to do it on a player-by-player basis to make it a little bit easier for ourselves to remember where we've gone. The most expensive departure at City during the summer was Cole Palmer to Chelsea. Have we been impressed by Palmer since signing for Chelsea? He got his first Premier League goal just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, he's not played every game, but since he's come into the team, he's looked very promising, and it was really interesting to see him on penalties for Chelsea because that is something you associate with kind of a more experienced player, like a Raheem Sterling or Enzo's taken a few penalties, and you wonder kind of when Nkunku comes back whether he will be on them, but great from Palmer's point of view to step up and say, I'll happily take penalties. I think, it's strange with Palmer because we've spoken about City being maybe a wide forward light. Palmer would have been perfect on the right wing if he had wanted the challenge, but the way the summer went, his mind was kind of made up to move on. And again, it is kind of City selling to a rival, as they did last season with Jesus and Zinchenko, and they kind of helped Arsenal, so maybe Palmer can help Chelsea, as kind of Sterling is helping Chelsea as well. So it's I think a lot of people at City would like to see Palmer do well because of his upbringing through the City Academy, and he's started off well, and he's put himself kind of firmly on Pochettino's radar, and Pochettino now knows he can count on him. So Chelsea have a lot of attackers, and Palmer can't be guaranteed of a start, but if he can go close to kind of making a place in the team his own, then I think that has to count as a real success and kind of vindication of the move for him.
And from the most expensive to what I would argue the biggest loss for City in the summer, Ilkay Gundogan. Have you seen any of Barcelona so far this season outside of the Champions League? And what do you think about this sort of move? Because I think, like I say, Ilkay Gundogan probably was the biggest loss for City in the summer. They had to replace him pretty late on with Matheus Nunes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, well, we've kind of reported it. Kind of City could have done more earlier to keep Gundogan, and I think he would have stayed. But because they didn't, and because Barcelona was so welcoming to him, he kind of took up that challenge instead, and he looks to be giving Barcelona kind of an important rhythm and doing what he does. He's a hugely intelligent footballer, and it's no real surprise to see him kind of just settle in instantly and make a difference in the team and in the league. So it is a real coup for Barcelona to get
on
him
a free as well. So.
Yeah, in a way that it maybe isn't such a coup to get Cancelo. Yeah. We'll see.
Well, that's who I'm going to come on to now.
Yeah.
João Cancelo, he's been out of the City side for a while. He is technically still a City player. He's only on loan at Barcelona this season.
Yeah.
Do you think there's ever going to be a way back into the City side, or do you think this is him with a view to a permanent move, sort of moving out his house early? Let's say.
Yeah. I don't think there is a future for him at City. I think those bridges are well and truly burned. It's quite funny to sort of, see a few clips of him at Barcelona from, assists or whatever, and say, "Oh, I can't believe City let him go." And you think that's, there is a story, and it's not quite sort of, what he's doing in those highlights isn't really why he's not in the City team and the City squad still. So they let him go in January to Bayern Munich, and it looked like they could be leaving themselves short. They said, Rico Lewis can cover it, and it felt like a gamble, and they went on and won the treble and beat Bayern Munich, who had Cancelo playing for them, and Bayern nearly didn't win anything last season, but it was clear from then that City can move on and do not miss or need Cancelo back in the squad. So he went on tour with them in the summer, but it kind of nobody was ever expecting him to stay. So I don't think there will be. Yeah, I would imagine he will leave next summer, providing Barcelona can come up with a fee.
You'll know more about this than me. Is he available on a free next summer? Will it have to be a fee?
No.
When does his contract run out?
I think his contract's 2027.
Right.
So it will have to be.
So it'll have to be a fee for someone.
However, I don't think the fee would be as high as they would want for, say, like Bernardo Silva over the last 2 years and things like that.
And obviously, talking high fees, we saw a lot of high fees to the Saudi Pro League over the summer.
Yeah.
Mahrez and Laporte will band them together because I don't think, I haven't watched too much Saudi Pro League. I don't know if you've watched.
No, I've not. Either. But I was really interested to see Laporte playing for Spain against Norway and shutting Haaland down, because I think in this country we kind of don't think that the Saudi Pro League is anywhere near the standard of the Premier League, and sort of you see John Henderson in the England team, you think, well, he's in a worse league now, he can't be as good
as he once was
at the same standards. Yeah. And then you see like Laporte shutting Haaland down, or there's like a clip on Twitter of him pinging sort of passes in the air with Gavi, and you think, yeah, he's still a real
an excellent player.
Yeah. So Laporte was one of the surprises of the window, because it was just sort of, you couldn't believe that no other club was in for him really, because he is such a great defender still. So it was kind of surprised that no one else really came in at sort of that 25 million mark to take him. But yeah, still looks a real player, and Mahrez as well. It is a player that, like we said, City do miss, and we're not expecting him to leave this summer, but he wanted a new challenge. Guardiola said after the FA Cup semi-final when he scored 3 that he'd lost the fight to convince him he was an important player. So I think he wanted something new.
Want something new rather than being at City and playing what was a bit part last season, really.
Yeah, and it's demanding to be at City and it's demanding to be under Guardiola. And I think when Cancelo left for Bayern, I think it was his wife who posted on Instagram and said, like, now you don't need to prove yourself anymore. And that is an attitude, but it's an attitude that won't last at City because you need to prove yourself every day.
You wouldn't have thought it would last at most top clubs, would you?
No, well, I don't know, but it's one of those.
Well, it didn't last at Bayern, I suppose.
Well, no, but there are examples in the past where other players have had their noses put out of joint by Guardiola, kind of picking inexperienced players ahead of them, and usually those inexperienced players go on to be better.
And talking of inexperience then, Premier League loanees, City have 3 players currently on loan to other Premier League clubs in McAtee, Doyle and Kabore at Luton. Do we think any of these have a City future? Because there was a lot of hype around especially McAtee when he was coming through. Yeah,
McAtee is one that they are still thinking of for next season. He's still kind of in their plans to come into the team. They would have happily kept him this summer. They knocked back a lot of... they knocked back all interest in him, basically, kind of for most of the summer. And then the last few weeks when they brought in Nunes, I think the player wants to play, and especially after he'd played such an important role in bringing Sheffield United up. There were a lot of teams who wanted to take him on loan, but he kind of thought that Sheffield United was the best chance for him to sort of settle instantly, because he did take some time to settle last season, where he's going back into an environment that he knows. It's going to be a real struggle for him in a team that will struggle this season rather than a team that was playing well. Because, he's kind of seen as like a flair player by Sheffield United fans, but being a flair player in the Championship is different from being a flair player in the Premier League, where you've less kind of luxury afforded to you. So that will be the big step for him. But, from a City point of view, they said last season, make the difference and go and be that important player and get them promotion. And we're very impressed by, first, how he responded to kind of being left out of the team and setbacks, but then how he, played that role. He's still very much in the plans. I kind of think that Tommy Doyle will be off to Wolves at the end of the season. They've got an option to buy him, and he's started okay. He's not been involved hugely, but he has looked all right when he's come on. I saw him when he played against Liverpool, and he seemed to do okay. But the fact that he wasn't in Pep's plans over the summer kind of told you he's not really there for the long-term thinking at City. And Kabore as well, a bit like McAtee, is in a struggle to do well at Luton, but has had a pretty solid start. They've not,
They've not looked anywhere near as bad as I thought they would, Luton. I guess that's what you were going to say.
I don't think they've been embarrassed by anyone. They've lost games, most of the games, but they've not lost them 4-0 and 5-0 and things like that. And they lose 1-0 to Spurs. It was
I've been pleasantly surprised by how resilient Luton look at the very least.
Yeah, and Cabore's, chipped in with a few attacking returns, so he's an interesting one. City have got a few kind of fullbacks out on loan. Jan Couto is another one.
Girona.
Yeah.
I think he's just made the Brazil squad, hasn't he?
Yeah. So yeah, those are sort of a few to keep an eye on, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at Luton here, just stay on Luton for a little second.
Yeah.
They've pretty much lost all their games that they have lost by 1 goal, which is pretty positive for a side that everybody expected to not really put up too much of a fight in the Premier League. I think that's fair.
Yeah, and it kind of suggests that could easily change.
Yeah, I agree. And let's hope from a City point of view, Cabora is at the centre of that.
Yeah.
From a sort of end this podcast off sort of point, have City missed any of their summer departures so far? Like, explicitly missed them? Has there been any moments where you'd thought, Gundogan would have done really well there, Mahrez could have really helped win this game?
Yeah. I mean, they have, and I think, a big part of City has been the kind of dressing room leaders, and the success has been driven by those players, and the players that can kind of turn up and win big games and have match-winning moments. And, Mahrez and Gundogan were two that in their peak, and Gundogan's peak was kind of in his final months for the club, could just kind of decide games on their own. And also, that experience of bringing, just sort of bringing on the team and helping them through both games and the week. It has felt like City have kind of lost a bit of leadership, as well as players simply in the 11. And so it is on, the leaders that were already there to step up again, but also, Foden needs to take on more responsibility this season. Alvarez, Haaland even, and Bernardo Silva is a sort of part of the leadership group now, so he should be taking on a bit more. But yeah, I think City don't tend to miss players that leave, but they also don't have many players who they don't lose many players who they don't want to lose. Whereas I think Gundogan certainly fell into that category, and Mahrez a bit as well. So it will be, we will wait and see how they kind of how well they can cover for those losses.
And that brings the podcast to an end. There is an anecdote that I have been saving about City for a couple of weeks until I make my return to this City channel. I actually bumped into cheeky Gerenstein outside a nightclub in Manchester a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
Which is one of the stranger meetings I've had with...
What did you have to say to him?
Well, I didn't think it was him. I just went, hello, are you cheeky? And he went, hello. Yeah. And shook his hand and walked off, and I was like, all right, okay.
Nice.
That was a strange experience, but it's weird how you bump into people that you just sort of recognise without recognising them anyway. Thank you for watching this episode of the Talking City podcast. Thank you for listening if you did listen. Make sure to check us out on our YouTube channel and across all of our social medias. Thank you, Simon, for your input today.
It's fine. Anytime.
And thank you for listening. Speak to you later.